In 1952, just 7 years after the end of World War II, the United States and Japan signed an aviation agreement that would quietly reshape global air travel for the next 6 decades. Under that agreement, American carriers gained extraordinary rights to fly through Tokyo and continue onward to other Asian cities. Northwest Airlines was one of the biggest beneficiaries. Pan Am was the other. These weren't ordinary route rights, they were Fifth Freedom rights, allowing a US airline to carry passengers between 2 foreign countries as part of a service that began in its home market. In an era when aircraft couldn't fly non-stop from Detroit to Manila, this was extraordinary. Tokyo became the bridge. American Airlines used Japan as a gateway to all of Asia, and they used it for decades. For most of the 20th century, that arrangement made perfect sense. Geography, technology, and politics all aligned to make Tokyo the obvious connection point. Then the world changed. In late 2008, Delta Airlines completed its merger with Northwest Airlines, inheriting one of the most powerful US-Asia networks ever built. At its peak in 2011, Delta operated flights from Tokyo Narita to 22 destinations across Asia and the United States. By March 29, 2020, every single one of those connecting flights was gone. But here's what makes no sense. Delta didn't shrink because Tokyo got smaller. Tokyo is still one of the most important business markets on the planet. Delta flies there every day, from Atlanta, Detroit, Seattle, Los Angeles, Honolulu. Yet the hub itself, the connecting empire that Northwest had built over half a century, was completely dismantled. 22 routes collapsed to 0 connecting flights within Asia. A flight attendant base that employed roughly 60 regular and 95 contract Japanese cabin crew was closed entirely. So, how does an airline walk away from a hub that took 70 years to build? To understand why Delta abandoned Tokyo, we need to understand why it had Tokyo in the first place. Delta did not create the Tokyo hub. It inherited it, along with the question of whether it still made sense. Before the 2008 merger, Delta's identity was Atlantic heavy. Its strength was Europe, Latin America, and its massive domestic backbone through Atlanta. The Pacific was largely Northwest's territory. Northwest had built something extraordinary at Narita. Northwest used Tokyo to reach several Asian cities. Passengers from Detroit, Minneapolis, and other Northwest hubs would fly trans-Pacific to Tokyo, then connect onward across Asia. Delta absorbed all of it overnight. The Asian routes, the trans-Pacific aircraft, the Tokyo rights, the Narita terminal facilities, the flight attendant base, the relationships, the maintenance footprint. It also absorbed the strategic question buried inside all of that infrastructure. Was this hub valuable because of history, or because it still matched the future? For decades, Northwest had answered that question with confidence. The 1952 Fifth Freedom rights were among the most valuable assets in commercial aviation. Japan was the wealthiest economy in Asia, the most strategically important US ally in the region, and geographically positioned as a perfect bridge between North America and the rest of the continent. But by the late 2000s, 3 structural shifts were already eroding the foundation. Delta inherited Tokyo, right as Tokyo was becoming obsolete. The first problem was technology. When Northwest built its Tokyo hub, aircraft range was a real limitation. A Boeing 747 could cross the Pacific, but reaching deeper Asian markets from US hubs non-stop was either impossible or commercially marginal. Tokyo solved this by acting as a refueling and aggregation point. Then the aircraft got better. The Boeing 747-400 extended range significantly. The 777 made non-stop service from US hubs to Asian destinations routinely viable. Then came the Airbus A330, then the A350, and the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Suddenly, US airlines could fly directly from their domestic hubs to Seoul, Shanghai, Beijing, Hong Kong, Taipei, and Manila. Once non-stop became possible, passenger preference shifted decisively. Business travelers universally prefer point-to-point flights over connecting itineraries. The better aircraft became, the less useful Narita became. The second problem was that Asia itself transformed. Narita was built for an Asia where Japan was the gateway. Delta was now flying into a continent with many gateways. China grew from a peripheral market into one of the largest aviation systems in the world. South Korea built Seoul Incheon into a hyper-efficient connecting hub. Singapore Changi, Hong Kong, Bangkok, and Taipei all matured into major international airports with their own strong local carriers. Asian airlines became formidable competitors in their own right. They had stronger brand loyalty in their home markets, deeper local feed, and increasingly modern fleets. They no longer needed American carriers to distribute their passengers. Japan was still important, it just was no longer the unavoidable bridge. The Fifth Freedom route that had once been gold became financially difficult to defend. Delta's Tokyo hub was built on the right to fly beyond Japan, but the market no longer needed Delta to do it. Local Asian carriers were operating those same routes with better local connectivity, lower costs, and superior brand recognition in their home markets. By the mid-2010s, Delta was running a Cold War-era hub structure into a 21st century Asian market that had moved on. The third problem was geographical and uniquely Japanese. Tokyo has two major airports, Narita and Haneda. For connecting passengers, Narita was fine. The whole point of a hub airport is the transfer, not the city. But for travelers whose actual destination was Tokyo, Haneda was dramatically more convenient. A taxi from Haneda to central Tokyo can take under 30 minutes. From Narita, the same journey can exceed an hour. For high-yield business travelers, that difference is enormous. Narita was useful when Tokyo was a bridge. Haneda became more important when Tokyo became the destination. For years, this didn't matter much because Haneda had limited international slots, especially for US carriers. But beginning in 2010 and accelerating through the 2010s, Japan gradually opened more daytime international slots at Haneda. Each new round of slot allocations pulled premium business traffic away from Narita. Delta found itself operating a connecting hub at the wrong airport for local Tokyo demand. Delta didn't abandon Narita overnight. The hub gradually shrank, year after year, route after route, between 2011 and 2018. Each route cut was justified individually. Each cut also weakened the connecting feed for everything else that remained. The hub was eating itself. The math was unforgiving. Fewer beyond routes meant less connecting traffic. Less connecting traffic meant emptier trans-Pacific flights. Emptier trans-Pacific flights meant fewer reasons to maintain Narita gates, lounges, and crew bases. By 2019, Delta's Narita operation was a skeleton of its former self. Delta did not close a thriving hub, it closed the remains of one. But there's a deeper reason Delta's Tokyo hub fell apart, while United and American kept thriving in Japan. It comes down to partnerships, and this is where the story gets genuinely interesting. United Airlines has All Nippon Airways through Star Alliance. American Airlines has Japan Airlines through oneworld. These aren't casual codeshare relationships, they're deep trans-Pacific joint ventures with revenue sharing, coordinated schedules, and integrated networks. Through ANA and JAL, United and American gained access to massive domestic Japanese feed and regional Asian connectivity that their own metal couldn't provide. Their Tokyo flights weren't dependent on US origin traffic alone. Delta had no equivalent Japanese partner. It had inherited Northwest's metal and Northwest's rights, but it didn't have a SkyTeam Alliance counterpart inside Japan. Delta had the old rights, its rivals had the modern partners. This left Delta's Tokyo hub structurally isolated. Without local feed, Delta had to rely entirely on its own aircraft to bring passengers into Tokyo and distribute them across Asia. That model worked in 1985, it was unsustainable by the 2010s. Delta knew this. In 2015, Japan's third largest carrier, the budget airline Skymark, filed for bankruptcy. Skymark held 36 highly coveted landing slots at Haneda. Delta saw an opportunity to solve its alliance deficit. Backed by Skymark's largest creditor, Intrepid Aviation, Delta proposed a rehabilitation plan that would have given it nearly a 20% stake in Skymark, access to Haneda slots, and a domestic Japanese partner. The Japanese aviation establishment did not welcome the intrusion. ANA submitted a rival sponsorship plan, heavily supported by Japanese banks and quietly blessed by the industry. The creditors voted for the ANA-backed plan. Delta was blocked. Without Skymark, Delta had no path to organic Haneda growth and no Japanese partner to anchor a future Tokyo hub. The Skymark failure forced Delta to look elsewhere for an Asian connecting strategy, and it found one, just not in Japan. Delta's answer was Korean Air. In 2018, the two carriers launched a comprehensive trans-Pacific joint venture, and this single partnership fundamentally rewrote Delta's Asia strategy. Why run your own fading hub at Narita when Korean Air already has a better one at Incheon? Seoul Incheon is widely regarded as one of the best connecting airports in the world. Korean Air already operated a deep network across Asia. Through the joint venture, Delta could fly passengers from the US directly into Seoul and seamlessly transfer them onto Korean Air's network. Narita was Delta, doing Asia alone. Incheon was Delta, doing Asia with a local giant. This was cleaner, more efficient, and far better aligned with modern alliance economics. Delta could focus on what it did well, namely US origin trans-Pacific flying, and let Korean Air handle distribution across Asia. Within 5 years, the joint venture grew connecting passenger traffic at Incheon. Americans solved Japan through JAL, United solved Japan through ANA. Delta solved Asia by leaving Japan behind. At the same time, Delta was rebuilding its Pacific gateway on the American side of the ocean. In the early 2010s, Delta invested heavily in turning Seattle-Tacoma International Airport into a major trans-Pacific hub. Delta's new Pacific hub was not across the ocean, it was in Seattle. Seattle made geographic sense. It sits closer to Asia than Atlanta, Detroit, or Minneapolis, allowing shorter and more economical flights. It also had strong local business demand, particularly from the technology sector. By feeding domestic passengers through Seattle and flying non-stop to Asia, Delta could replicate the connecting logic that Narita once provided. Except now, the connection happened in the US, not in Japan. The connection moved from Tokyo back to America. Detroit, Atlanta, Minneapolis, and Los Angeles all played supporting roles. Each was a former Northwest stronghold or Delta megahub, with enough domestic feed to support non-stop Asian service when paired with modern aircraft. The strategic logic had inverted. Instead of US to Tokyo to Asia, Delta could fly US to Asia directly, with the connection happening on the American side. The final symbolic blows came in 2019. In August of that year, Delta announced it would end its Tokyo to Singapore service and move its Tokyo to Manila operation to connect through Seoul Incheon instead. Tokyo to Singapore and Tokyo to Manila were the last beyond Tokyo routes, the final living examples of the old Fifth Freedom hub logic. When they disappeared, the hub concept disappeared with them. Once Singapore and Manila disappeared, Tokyo stopped being a hub and just became another destination. Delta could still fly to Tokyo, it just no longer needed to fly through Tokyo. After the US Department of Transportation allocated 12 new daytime Haneda slots in 2019, Delta secured the largest share. This enabled non-stop service to Haneda from more US cities. On March 29, 2020, Delta officially consolidated all its Tokyo flights at Haneda. The Narita hub was over. The move to Haneda saved Delta's Tokyo relevance, but killed Delta's Tokyo hub. Haneda gave Delta access to high-yield Tokyo passengers. It did not give Delta the ability to recreate a massive connecting bank. Haneda is severely slot-constrained, and Delta's hard-won slots could only support point-to-point US to Tokyo service. Haneda gave Delta the Tokyo passenger. It did not give Delta back the Tokyo empire. Most US airlines could not have abandoned Tokyo the way Delta did. United still operates meaningfully at Narita and Haneda because the ANA partnership gives it local Japanese feed that Delta never had. American still uses Tokyo as a major Pacific gateway because JAL provides the same local infrastructure. Their Tokyo operations are integrated into Japanese networks in ways Delta's never were. Delta's withdrawal wasn't a failure of execution, it was a recognition that its specific structural position, inheriting Northwest's rights without inheriting a Japanese partner, made Tokyo uniquely unsustainable. Narita did not become useless, it became less useful to an airline without a local partner. The same airport that was indispensable to United and American was a liability for Delta. Identical infrastructure, completely different strategic value. Delta's March 2020 consolidation coincided almost exactly with the global COVID-19 collapse. This timing created a misleading narrative that the pandemic forced the closure. COVID did not kill Delta's Tokyo hub, it simply arrived at the funeral. The strategic decision had been formalized in 2019. The route cuts had been happening for nearly a decade. The Korean Air joint venture was already operating. The Seattle pivot was already mature. COVID was simply the punctuation mark on a sentence that had already been written. Delta did not leave Tokyo because Tokyo stopped mattering. It left Narita because Tokyo mattered differently. Today, Delta operates a streamlined point-to-point Haneda schedule with flights from Atlanta, Detroit, Honolulu, Minneapolis, Seattle, and Los Angeles. The hub is gone. The market access remains. 7 decades later, Delta's withdrawal represents the complete opposite. Not a compromise forced by circumstance, but a deliberate choice to dismantle an inherited empire because the world that made it valuable no longer existed.